when now you and I, we think like intelligence analysts. We love to look for plots, but when there's no plot, we concede there is no plot because when you look at some sensationalist authors, when they create the impression of a plot, a grand plot behind, let's say, a presidential assassination or assassination attempt, when they try to build a case like this, they have to create a grand supposed motive. And that can only be done by exaggerating certain policies or inventing certain policies of that president. So this is what we saw with Lincoln. People claimed that Lincoln wanted to, now that's of course a classic, Lincoln wanted to just destroy the Jewish banking conspiracy, right? So he wanted to change the money system and he didn't want to get into crazy debt with the Jews, and that's why the Jews killed him. So this is a classic
that's
example.
such an awful,
Yeah.
ahistorical, incorrect view of the
He
Lincoln.
had to
You just
he
couldn't
had
be
to
more crazy.
when it came to financing the war back then, they used the standard set of instruments to finance the war. And so
Lincoln issued paper currency called greenbacks to
yeah,
help do it.
and it's just there's nothing too strange about it. I mean, of course, you could try to find interesting plots behind, let's say, foreign actors who tried to influence what was happening in America, trying to maybe destabilize America. That's a whole nother ballgame. But people just like that simplistic narrative of, Lincoln wanted to destroy this big Illuminati conspiracy, and that's why they whacked him, even though the American system is built to have redundancy, multiple levels of redundancy even. And so when you just look at such a supposed motive and the motive doesn't make sense, the whole idea of a plot doesn't make sense. Now, same thing that happened with John F. Kennedy, of course. People said that he was fighting the bankers, he was trying to destroy the money system and just destroy the Jewish well conspiracy. That's why they killed him. So it's like that again and again and again. But the system, of course, has built-in redundancy, and I think that it's clear that Oswald knew that. Because we know from Oswald, and people can check out the show that we've done about him, people know that Oswald was a cynical bastard. He thought he didn't care who was president. He just wanted to commit that act, get the ball rolling. Classic Leninist Marxist terror strategy. And he knew that Kennedy was going to be replaced with another capitalist/imperialist person. So this is kind of like, you have to look at a motive. Does it make sense? Now, with this Thomas Crooks guy and the Trump shooting, I want to emphasize that the Republican Party has redundancy. So if Trump had been if Trump had been killed or permanently disabled, the Republican Party could have run another candidate and won by a landslide. That's just how it is. Now, when it comes to Thomas Crooks, I'm looking for, with Thomas Crooks, I'm looking for indirect influence on him. So, how did he get this idea? And was he a radical incel? You know, a guy who never had a girlfriend and he was thinking he was always going to be poor. He could never afford a house. He would never get the kind of girl he wanted. And so by adopting this ideology, and this is a separate category actually of terrorism, there are studies from America and Canada and Europe. They know that this phenomenon can occur just by itself. These people sometimes are linked to traditional ideological extremism, but not always linked to traditional ideologies. So just by being a radical incel, these people might see Donald Trump as an enemy because Trump got away with certain things. Trump got all the women, and Trump is a wealthy man, and that sort of thing. So by knocking off a person like Trump, This is actually what some of these shooters, and I have some cases listed here. This is what some of these incel terrorists have actually, what these terrorists have actually verbalized. They said, we want to destroy this tyranny of dominant men who get all the women, and we'd also like to destroy the attractive women too. So the world would be a much fairer place, so to say. And of course, there's a money component as well, because the people on top, they got money, and Thomas Crooks didn't have money. And so people expected a quick answer who this guy was, but the FBI didn't really find much of a digital footprint, and there may be several reasons for that. Now, one reason is he was kind of a smart little bastard. He was into computer programming. He was very handy with computers, and I know these kind of people, right? So they can drive around in their car with a laptop, and they can find an unsecured or less secured Wi-Fi signal, let's say from a fast food joint or somebody in the neighborhood who's still running an old system, an old Wi-Fi router. So you can find these signals, you hack into one of them, so you can actually use somebody else's internet connection. So you're surfing the web, and it appears like this other person is surfing the web, and this is how you can access the regular internet. This is how you can access the deep web, the dark web, using more obfuscation techniques. So this is kind of a way to learn how to make explosives, because we know that explosives have been found. The authorities are not really precise in their description yet, because, of course, there's an ongoing investigation. It seems like high-level explosives of some sort, which are somewhat more difficult to make. So a dumb person with no proper manual would not necessarily be able to cook up real explosives. You need concentrated acids, and this is a very meticulous process to create these little crystals. And so he may have accessed the web somewhere else in order to gain those skills. Also, when it comes to his ideology, he may have been frequenting incel forums. He may have been frequenting other things. So this may have been because he was a smart little bastard, and he was handy with computers. Now, I think that maybe, when was the Snowden stuff happening? Because he probably knew about the Snowden revelations, and he was cautious because of that stuff. Or
Yeah,
he heard about it later.
I think Snowden's defection was 2013, right?
But he probably heard about it later, right? So he was aware that the NSA had... Because if you're an internet-savvy guy, if you know about computers and stuff, you heard about the NSA, you heard about the Snowden stuff, you know how stuff gets recorded or scanned, the internet traffic, and so maybe that's the reason why or how he could keep such a small, very small digital footprint. Of course, it's possible, theoretically, that somebody coached him, that somebody told him to be like this, that somebody said, well, if you want to do something big, if you want to plan something, you can't leave a footprint, because they will get you if you do leave a footprint, if you make verbal threats, if you research explosives, if you research other assassins. And he did some of that. I mean, there's some indications that
they found explosives in his car. Wasn't his car wired to blow up?
Yeah, and I think the description was sophisticated, actual high-order explosives, not a big amount, because it's difficult kind of to make, because you have to get these highly concentrated acids. You can buy them and purify them, but if you buy larger amounts and you're a young white guy, this purchase may be recorded. I've looked at quite a bit of material on the web, stuff like these videos on TikTok, the popular video app. And there's so many videos like this. It's these young people, they film themselves in their car and they're saying, work is terrible, the hours are too long, they don't pay me enough, I can barely pay my rent, I can barely buy my food, I'm expected to do this for the rest of my life. I'm exhausted. I hate everything. I don't have time to have fun. I don't have time to have a relationship or have friends. And I can never afford a house. This used to be much easier in the past. These older generations, they could afford a house, but I can't. And the system is not working. Everything is bad. We need some sort of a revolution. Now, they don't speak out that revolution part explicitly, but that's what they mean. If when they say it's impossible to have a life, what other option do they really suggest? Because that's kind of like the personality of somebody who's devious. They outwardly they are fairly normal. Nobody pays attention to them, but at night, when they're at home in front of their computer, or when they're in their car driving around with their laptop finding unsecured Wi-Fi networks, they become like the Dark Knight. They become like Batman in their own minds on the web, and they start plotting things and they feel powerful. And you can even buy illicit substances on the deep web. You can ship them to somebody else's address and pick up the parcel. Nobody will know that it's you if you're clever about this. He may have experimented with, psychedelic substances. Maybe he was giving that a shot. We don't know it at this point. But as a young guy, from a difficult, somewhat dysfunctional home, as it seems, he may have had some weird mental tendencies, especially at that age. Because usually, if a young man just is terribly unhappy, no girlfriend, totally depressed, not lifting weights, not doing sports, just not becoming a man, really. I mean, you have to look at the father. I mean, this is just something that you have to look into, because this young man probably thought, my father failed, God failed, teachers failed, government failed, president failed, everything failed. Now, we know that, from anecdotal evidence, we know that he didn't like the entire political spectrum, but we don't know what his opinion was about other governments in other countries. What did he think of the Russians? Did he think Russia did a better job? I would be interested to know that, because usually these 20-year-olds, they don't understand the world. They don't really understand anything beyond their sphere of what they can see, what they've experienced so far. And they tend to think the grass is greener somewhere else. He may have chosen to leave almost no footprint digitally, no manifesto, because it seems more powerful, because it's more intimidating if he's a mystery, right? The researchers Hoffman, Ware, and Shapiro in 2020 in a study found that nearly 70% of users of the incels.co forum were depressed, and over 25% were on the autism spectrum. The researcher Moskalenko and others and colleagues in 2022 reports staggering rates of self-reported depression, 95%, and anxiety, 93%, in a survey of 274 incels. So especially if you have depression and anxiety, and this can be a problem for you for the rest of your life. You could try medication, but that's not always a solution for that. And so these people may understand, I'm suffering, I will always be suffering, I will never have a good life, I will never make money, and I will always have this anxiety and depression. So it's a better way for them, as you said, to go out with a bang. This can, and there's some, here's a case. This is from 2017. This was called the Aztec High School shooting. The shooter was 21 years old, William Atchison. He was identified as an incel, involuntary celibate, never had a girlfriend. His online activities included writing pro-Hitler and pro-Trump posts and visiting internet forums such as 4chan and Kiwi Farms, as well as white nationalist websites such as the Daily Stormer. He used various usernames, including future mass shooter and names modeled after several mass murderers. And he posted something. It said, work sucks, school sucks, life sucks, I just want to get out of it all. And then you had a guy who was called Alec Manassian. He was driving a van into a Toronto sidewalk in 2018, killing 10 people. So much for gun
Oh
control.
boy.
These people just use a truck, right? You don't need any guns whatsoever. Manassian has told police he was radicalized online by other incels. Before the attack, Manassian posted a message on Facebook, quote, "The incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys." That's slang term for dominant, attractive men and attractive women. Long live Supreme Gentleman Elliot Rodger. Now, Elliot Rodger was a nutbag. Elliot Rodger was killing 6 people in a shooting and stabbing in California in 2014. He published a 141-page incel manifesto and has since become a martyr in the incel community. Now, if you post something like this, if you create a manifesto, it can come off as insane and whiny and self-serving and just plain crazy. So maybe Crooks wanted to remain a mystery. He thought he would seem the memory of him would be more powerful if there was no clear motive.
By police.
So
Yeah.
the more prominent the target and the more Secret Service protection, the more likely you are to find suicidal tendencies. This is almost like this is almost like it's a physical reality. There's a clear cause and effect here when you look at this, and so yeah, this is kind of something that was noted a lot. There have been, of course, the schizos and the weirdos. There was one person who believed he was hearing voices because of a government secret satellite program. And he believed by killing a federal official of some sort, he would bring attention to the subject, and ultimately the press would get on it and finally reveal the secret federal program with these satellites. But usually it's depression, it's anxiety. These people are suffering every day and nobody cares. And this is also something that the so-called red pill community or black pill community is telling its followers. Nobody cares about you. This is the grim reality you have to accept. Nobody comes to help you. Nobody will save you. And literally nobody cares. I mean, your parents may have cared for you when you were a little child. They did stuff for you, but ultimately there's nobody else who gives a damn about you. No girls care about you. No men respect you, care about you. Nobody wants to help you or do something positive for you. You can have a job. You can exchange your labor for money, but that's it. And so it's like this downward spiral that these people are getting themselves into. And the audience out there, they want to hear a gimmicky ideological reason why he did that. They want him to be a radical leftist. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But people just want it to be it this way. People want him to be a Muslim convert. This is because they want it. They assume it's true. But reality almost never is the way you want it to be. And especially in the intelligence world, in the law enforcement world, you're trying to figure out how something is, not the way you want it to be, right? With this, I said this at the beginning of the show. If a sensationalist author influencer wants to present the narrative of a grand plot, that person needs to come up with a strong motive, and to have a strong motive, you need to exaggerate the features of the target of the assassination. In this case, exaggerate features of Trump. Now, what is this exaggeration? It's this idea that Trump is magic, that he's going to magically play 4-dimensional chess and save America by himself or with a hidden team of Q magicians and just make everything nice and dandy in a matter of months or weeks. And a lot of people have clung to this idea, even though it was becoming more and more clear that, for example, Nikki Haley could have been really successful. I mean, Nikki Haley could have beat Biden pretty significantly. But then a lot of activists started hating on Nikki Haley, calling her weak and calling her deep state and calling her all kinds of things because they were still clinging to this magic Trump fantasy. And so this is sort of what we're seeing right now, I believe, when people are thinking, Trump must be so awesome, right? Trump must be such a magical guy that this deep state conspiracy try to shoot him. This is, of course, the narrative we saw from Alex Jones and others because it sells. It sounds really
Yeah, have
intense
you,
and
by the
and
way,
just
have you seen any of these Jones clips during the week
I
about the assassination
saw I
attempt?
saw a bunch of false stuff that was posted. Apparently, Alex Jones has learned nothing from the Sandy Hook fiasco and the
No, he's
the
learned nothing.
huge billion plus dollar settlement or punishment that he got because they posted some stuff that the shooter was really that person, a trans person, I believe it was. I think it was in Salon magazine the other day. So this somebody came up with this nonsense saying that the shooter was really a trans person, but that was apparently false. But they ran with the story because it's a sensationalist sounding story, and it seems to confirm the ideas that the audience already has. Because if you have adopted these ideological gimmicks, you believe that you can solve every case in 5 minutes. Immediately, you have the
Yeah, because
explanation.
because you have your conspiracy theory, which is the key that opens every door, and
I
all
mean,
you have to do is
sometimes, yeah,
consult that it's
sometimes it
they them
happens.
that did it, right?
Yeah, sometimes it happens really fast. This was the case with 9/11 because you knew what people had booked these planes, these flights. So you could check the flight manifesto, you can see these specific names. You can find out that a couple of them they lived in Germany, in Hamburg, and then they started raiding apartments and places in Germany almost immediately. And so you had these names, you had these faces because different agencies in the world had already looked at them once or twice. Sometimes it happens pretty fast, and we can understand a motive and say, yeah, these were Islamist crazies who hated America. And then you can look into all the other stuff in the background because these people had complete lives. Somebody like Mohammed Atta, he was not a 20-year-old. Mohammed Atta
No,
had a very long life. He visited very specific places. They had this radical mosque in Hamburg that was already under suspicion because every nutbag was visiting this mosque. So this is how sometimes you can immediately say, okay, it's these people. We have a pretty solid sounding motive, and we're looking further into this. But people expect that every time. They expect every time an immediate motive, an immediate explanation. And so influencers immediately say the Democrats did it, the Democrats shot him. Why would they use a 20-year-old moron who was more likely to get killed by police or die with the old suicide by cop thing?